You did, I mean, you were breaking up a bit, but we did get this substance, and I hope the Lord will be with us this morning and forevermore. Members, we have one apology, as the Secretary Anila indicated, from Senator Scott Motley. Who do we have on at the moment from the select? I see AG, you're on. Who else?
I'm here, Julian.
Hi, good morning, Julian. Who else is on?
I'm here, Minister.
Senator Charles Sinclair, good morning, Senator.
Morning, Minister.
I know Marsh is on. Huh?
AG is on as well, sir.
Yes, I indicated AG is Ministers Camina Johnson, Smith, or Minister Faber Williams, are you on? Member Dwight Sybils?
No, sir. I forgot to add that Senator Johnson Smith would also be absent. I've gotten that information from last.
Okay. So we don't have a quorum, but I'm just checking who else is on. It's Member Bunting, Sybils, Graham, Cousins.
No.
All right. Anila, you have something on the screen saying that this meeting is being recorded. Ask the technical team to take it off.
Okay, sir.
All right, we're going to begin because this morning what we plan to do is to get Warren Vernon and Kamika Facey to take us through the governing body, but primarily to again look at the remainder of those particular clauses that deal with the governing body. Colleagues will recall that when we examine the NERA, that is the Board of Management, especially clauses 5 and 6, we were concerned that the governing body appeared to be an executive body, which we thought would not be appropriate. If we felt the governing body should really be given direction to the executive director to execute the functions of the NERA, and that the governing body would be the one to ensure that the policies and programs and objectives from the authority, that they're properly carried out. So a number of changes have been made in terms of the governance structure of that governing body, which we're going to examine today and maybe tomorrow. And then maybe later tomorrow, but definitely by next week, we hope to examine the inspectorate. And that is the commission, the ECJ commissioners have agreed to be the oversight body, the inspectorate, and will be accountable to Parliament for the operation of the NERA, to give reports, to express concerns, but they will constitute the oversight body. But I've indicated in correspondence that one or two items still remain to be sorted out. So we may not deal with inspectorate before next week. We shouldn't take more than a meeting, one for the morning meeting. And we're hoping that between this week and next week, we can sign off on the bill itself. So if there are no concerns from the Joint Select Committee members, I would then ask Kamika Facey to take us through the governing body of the NERA, that is the Board of Management, and how it will be reflected in the concerns that have been expressed by members and also by members of the public. Kamika, are you ready?
Yes, sir. Good morning.
All right. All right. You're on now.
Very well, sir. Right. So we prepared a PowerPoint presentation for the committee, and just as some background, as Minister indicated, This will be part A of the governance structures within the framework of the needs. As part B, there are still a few items that need to be looked at. So the presentation we'll be looking at, we'll give you a short introduction and overview. The scope of the document, as you know, the establishment of the authority as a commission, appointment of the executive director and other staff of the authority, the schedules and the documents that were looked at in preparing this, right? So the committee asked that the technical team at the Office of the Prime Minister recast the governance and oversight structures in the existing bill, right? And this document is going to seek to address the committee's concerns in order to strengthen the decision-making systems and the processes under a new governance structure that's designed to deliver the authority's objectives under the proposed bill in a manner which will remove all of the concerns that were previously expressed, or which it is hoped to be to remove those, right? And the governance structure in this document, therefore, will outline the relationships and separations of roles between the minister, the chairman, commissioners, committees of the authority, and the operational arm of the authority that's headed by the executive director. And it's anticipated that the governance structures as presented in this document should deliver on the management processes necessary to effect the national identification and registration system. The committee's membership, you may recall that one of the major issues was the size of the committee, and therefore the committee's membership has been reduced from 15 members to 9 members. And the members that are suggested or proposed focus specifically on the competencies and skills needed to develop partnerships that will implement and sustain the needs. Right. I'm going to now take you through the high-level governance structure, and it's showing the relationships and the separation of roles for the proposed authority and the independent oversight body, as well as the executive director. Because if the committee may recall, one of the issues that was raised more than one time was that it wasn't clear the reporting relationship to and from the independent oversight body, as in certain instances, the executive director was being directed by the oversight body without any clear link through the authority itself, the head of the authority. Okay, and here we have, so the minister, the National Identification and Registration Inspectorate, that is the proposed new name. To make it absolutely clear, it's currently in the bill, it's called the National Databases Inspectorate, but it's proposed that the name be changed to the National Identification and Registration Inspectorate, and that would be a commission of Parliament. Then the chairman of the NERA would now be one of these members. So there would be 9 commissioners, and we'll go more, I'll skip between this screen and more details below. There are certain committees that it is suggested be prescribed and stated in the legislation. The commissioners will direct the executive director, who will report directly to the commissioners. There'll be a legal, and this is the proposed internal operational structure. So you'd have the identity management services, corporate services, civil registration services, accounting, finance, information systems, security, the Island Records Office. So I will take you back here shortly, but I just wanted us, or rather the team would like to go through a bit more, right? Now, the establishment of the authority as a commission, looking on the authority that is currently in the bill, it would be a body corporate with a board of management. Therefore, when policy direction was sought, and the proposal is that the authority now be established as a commission. Not a commission of parliament, but a commission similar to the Early Childhood Commission that currently exists. And therefore, the authority would be, the members of the authority would be the authority itself. So it's similar to a commission of parliament. However, it would not report to the parliament, and therein lies one of the distinctions. Now, the appointment of the members of the authority, it would be evidenced in writing. As indicated earlier, there'd be a fixed number of 9 members instead of the 15 members. Now, the chairman of the authority would be appointed from the 9 members by the Governor General, acting on the advice of the Prime Minister after consultation with the leader of the opposition. Nominees from the ministries represented would be submitted by the permanent secretaries to the Prime Minister for approval, and that approved list would be sent to the Governor General for appointment. It's also suggested that there be nominees from the private sector organization of Jamaica and the Jamaica umbrella group of churches, again appointed by the Governor General, acting on the advice of the Prime Minister after consultation with the leader of the opposition. And the policy that speaks to nomination and selection of boards was consulted, and accordingly, the private sector organization of Jamaica and the Jamaica umbrella group of churches would be asked to give, or rather to submit 2 members, nominate 2 members, and the Governor General would therefore only be appointing 1 from the panel of 2 members nominated by each entity. Now, it must be evidenced in writing, as well as, my apologies, we had indicated that already. A custos of Jamaica is also being proposed, as well as nominees with expertise in these particular areas: information and communication technology and cybersecurity, financial management and accounting, and human resources management and public administration. Now, the reason for these particular individuals, it was thought, or the thought process from the technical team, is that these persons represent key stakeholders, and they will be able to provide the linkages necessary, the competencies necessary to ensure that the authority does become and does do what it is envisaged to do. So the private sector organization of Jamaica would be one of the key stakeholders, because much of the verification requests would be emanating from the private sector organization of Jamaica. And it was thought that that organization represented a wide cross-section of the private sector. The Jamaica umbrella group of churches, as well as the custos, also would be important linkages between the public at the community and parish level and the authority, to ensure that the views and the needs of the public are being served in a manner that is consistent with the bill, as well as with the needs of the persons themselves.
Audio is gone. Not hear me though.
Go ahead, AG. AG, you wanted to ask a question? No, I think I continue.
Chairman, no, I was, as just indicated, isn't hearing.
All right, no problem. I continue, Kamika.
Very well, Chair. The nominees now, it was thought that there needed to be expertise in these particular areas, that those areas, experts in those areas would be able to contribute significantly to ensure that the authority was being managed in the appropriate manner. Now, remuneration, it's not
Kamika, I don't think we need to go into a lot of the details, but like in terms of you know, procedural meetings and so on, because these are the norm. What you could help us with is how, in structuring this authority, how will that vary from what was proposed in the original bill, and how will the original bill be modified to reflect what is being proposed?
All right, so as indicated, the membership is one important distinction.
Right.
It is now, so it's proposed now that there be an attorney at law of at least 15 years standing instead of the current judge.
So, sorry, Kamika, Chairman, you had indicated that it wasn't necessary to go into the details, but to the extent that any part of the revised structure will have to be reflected in provisions in law, then it's important that the committee be apprised.
Sure, I accept that, but not in the details such as remuneration, for example. You know, that is something to be dealt with by the Ministry of Finance, right?
No, the quantum of remuneration.
You're not coming across well at all, AG.
But I'm all right. Let's see.
The signal coming across is really poor.
Are you hearing me better now?
Hearing you much better, yes.
Right. I'm saying, while I agree with you that matters that the Ministry of Finance will have to decide on need not be dealt with, but if it is that the law is setting out how the remuneration would be done, anything that relates to what will be reflected in a clause should be presented. Not administrative details that would follow or from the clause itself when they become sections of the law.
Right. No, I accept that. But you know, as indicated in this, I think they're saying that the original proposal in the first schedule would remain in terms of the remuneration to the members of the commission. All right. Continue, Kamika. Please touch on it as we go along.
Okay, very well, sir. Additionally, the senior public official would now be from the authority, as the ministry to which the authority is assigned, and it was also it's also suggested that the other senior public official will be from the ministry responsible for national security. So the public officials have changed. My apologies. Right, tenure. It is proposed that the members would be appointed for a period of 5 years, but that the first appointments may be for periods less than 5 years, based on the policy of that ministry. None of these have changed, but those would, of course, as the AG said, have also been stated in the law. The functions of the authority. Now, this was a major concern that was raised several times in the deliberation of the committee. So the proposal is that the authority will take the form of a commission, and essentially the commission and the authority would be the same. The functions of the authority would become the functions of the commission itself. And those functions are currently encapsulated at clause 5, with, of course, the requisite modifications that the Chief Parliamentary Council would be suggesting. Now, a commission is usually given the power to appoint and employ such officers and employees as are necessary to carry out its functions under the provisions of the bill. The objects of the bill and the functions of the authority, it's suggested, should therefore be retained as the functions and objects, so as the functions of the commission in pursuit of the objects of the bill.
Can I interrupt, Kamika?
Yes, sir.
Just a question. What is the proposed term for the commissioners?
5 years. So
5 years. And can they be reappointed? Is there a limit by which 2, 3 terms? And removal, is that something where there would have to be a parliamentary procedure if they are to be removed?
Right, so they can be reappointed. In the first instance, it may be for periods less than 5 years in order to enable staggering for continuity. As it relates to removal, the removal process would remain the same. So it's for the same reasons that are currently noted in the bill. And so Their revocation of appointment would be for mental disorder. They've become ineligible to be appointed. They engaged in any activity that could be considered prejudicial, and that would be the Governor General revoking. So what would happen is that the appointment of the member could be revoked by resolution passed by a majority of all the members. And of course, you know, we would have to have the due process. So should it go to the Governor General, he would have
just for, I know you said it before, but just
You're breaking up.
Or you're gone.
oh, I am gone?
Yeah,
Well, you're
sorry.
back.
Okay.
Repeat, Julian.
I'm back now.
Yes, repeat.
Just for clarity, it's Governor General on the, is it advice of Prime Minister and Leader of Opposition or consultation with Prime Minister and Leader of Opposition?
On the advice of the Prime Minister after consultation with the Leader of the Opposition.
Okay, all right. And the chairman would be, the selection of the chairman is made by the members who are elected, or is that made by the Governor General himself?
The Governor General.
Okay. All right, go ahead, continue.
Okay, all right, thank you. Any other questions? Okay, please let me know if I'm going too fast.
No, go ahead.
Okay, right. Now, there must be some distinction between the operations and functions and the general administration of the authority. Now, the following modifications are recommended to achieve the policy direction regarding the authority vis-a-vis the executive director, because if you may recall, one of the major issues was the linkages rather between the executive director and the authority and the oversight body, and ensuring that there were clear lines of demarcation as to who is responsible for what. Now, the Integrity Commission Act and the Early Childhood Commission Act were consulted in developing the modifications that are being suggested. Right, so the functions of the so it would be that there is that the National Identification and Registration Authority would be established as a commission, and the Chief Parliamentary Council will of course have the proper amendment sheet for circulation to the committee and agreement to the by the committee to append to the report. So these are just just an outline to give the committee something.
Not hearing you.
But she's coming across well in her AG, so your connection could be the problem.
But yes, sure. Please indulge me. I didn't hear what came after Chief Parliamentary Council would be the proper.
Oh, right. So this was just a mock-up for the committee to be able to see, you know, what the provisions would look a bit like.
I see.
Right. So the functions that are currently in the bill would remain going forward. Apologies, the thing is moving a little slow. Right. Now, the change that was made was to make it clear, or that is being proposed to be made by the team, is to make it clear that the authority is the body responsible for developing the strategic direction and the policies in support thereof. Now, without prejudicing the generality of this section, they shall do certain things. So they'll review, evaluate, approve, and monitor the implementation by the executive director of the authority's corporate policies, operational, strategic, and corporate plans, the budget proposals, financial statements. The authority will also be responsible for keeping the minister and permanent secretary abreast of matters relating to the administration and management of the authority, including any need for financial resources, technological resources necessary to achieve its performance targets. And it's been made clear, suggested that it be made clear by stating that the authority will also give directions to the executive director in respect of the management of the authority. And they should operate in a manner that maximizes the effective and efficient operation of the authority. They'll approve the reports that are required by the Act or any other enactment to be submitted, monitor the performance of the authority, and require the executive director to provide it with periodic reports as the authority considers appropriate in respect of the management. And that was stated in that manner in order to delineate the responsibilities, to ensure that, yes, the authority is still responsible for the functions and ultimately responsible for the functions of the authority. The members of the authority, rather, or commissioners, are still responsible ultimately. However, they are responsible from a more strategic level. And so they will have the power to perform to utilize these particular mechanisms, which are also retained from the current bill, in order to achieve that, right? And here it is, we have indicated, let me try and go back, that right, so here it is again, the authority must comply with the directions issued to it by the inspectorate. And that is, of course, ensuring that the delineation is clear. Now, the authority may delegate any of its functions under the Act other than the power to delegate to the executive director or any other member of staff of the authority or a member of the authority itself. Now, every delegation would be revocable by the authority, and the delegation of the function doesn't prevent the authority from still performing that function. Right. It was because of the nature of the authority and how important function it is carrying out, the authority is suggested that the authority retain the power to carry out its functions by way of committees as it deems necessary. However, there are several important areas that the authority should be mandated to keep under consideration. And this, it is submitted, would be achieved by the institution of standing committees in the bill, or by requiring the authority to convene committees to consider certain subject areas. And the areas that are necessary are the usual financial management and accounting and audit and enterprise risk management. But in this instance, for the objects of this, the objective of this framework, certain other areas were deemed to be necessary: human rights and law, information and cybersecurity, and information communications technology. And these areas are areas which it is thought to be necessary because after having looked at the functions of the authority, as well as the submissions made by the different stakeholders, it was thought that these areas needed to be mandated in the bill. So the Human Rights and Law Committee, right, this would focus on ensuring that the authority acts in accordance with the requirements of the Constitution, the laws of Jamaica, and any other applicable obligation as it relates to the rights of enrolled individuals. Right? The committee also ensures, or it's proposed that the committee should also ensure that the authority has regard to any special needs and consideration of sectors of the society, such as the persons with disabilities, the elderly, and minors. So this committee would include representatives from human rights and civil society groups, individuals with a legal understanding of the privacy laws of Jamaica, understanding of regulatory compliance, so they'd be able to provide insights about data privacy and other areas of expertise, right? The enterprise...
So can you let me understand? All these committees, and you have a total of about 7 committees, they will be chaired by a member, by a commissioner of the authority, but their membership will consist of other persons outside of the authority?
It may. So it is proposed that each committee, as you indicated, would be chaired by a member. However, the membership may include individuals external to the authority with the approval of the authority. So there'd be some requirements for the members. They must be nominated or recommended by the relevant stakeholder group or professional association that's deemed necessary for that particular committee. They must also meet the fit and proper standards within the bill and possess the knowledge, skills, and experience that are applicable to that particular committee.
And these committees are basically to advise the authority in these various areas.
Right. Yes, sir. Right.
Wait,
So they,
let me ask. Do you think it's absolutely necessary to specify the external members? The reason I'm asking, you can always bring in persons to attend a meeting as needs be based on the specific issue that you might be discussing versus having external members, because there are a number of issues around confidentiality, which obviously they will sign something saying they will maintain that, but it's a very, I think, a high requirement for these external members joining committees. And I don't know if it is absolutely necessary when the committee has the option to invite persons as it needs if it has a particular issue to deal with.
well, we had considered that, but it was thought that the authority may not be able to have all the skill sets necessary without being able to or rather without providing and giving them the possibility of actually having external members on the committee.
But that's the point that member says in Jamaica.
Yes, sir. And right. So there were two things. We thought it was necessary for them to actually have external members on those committees, as well as to be able to co-opt persons for specific one-off, two-off, a month skill set to be utilized by the authority. But because of the specific areas, it was still thought that it may be necessary for external persons to be there.
Would these persons get compensation like board members on a public board?
That is the thought process, yes.
Okay.
So you see the point that Member Robinson, what I'm thinking, Kamika, is that we don't have to detail the membership and that they should be citizens of Jamaica, resident here, because these are ad hoc committees, as I understand it. I mean, the chairman will be a commissioner, yes, and he may have one or two other members of the authority, but in carrying out their functions to be able to better advise the overall members of the authority, they can co-opt such members and for such period as they see fit, or employ persons to carry out, the necessary research or to be able to properly advise the authority. Isn't that my understanding? So the membership is not a permanent membership. It's a sort of ad hoc membership as you go along. That's my understanding?
Well, it could be both. So there would be the ability to have external members for the duration of the board, as well as co-opted persons for specific tasks. But they would not have to be citizens of Jamaica, nor would they need to be resident in Jamaica, but they would be required to submit a declaration regarding their residence arrangements to fulfill the policy currently with regard to nomination and selection of committee members.
Okay.
So is it then that
I don't think it's absolutely necessary to be. I don't think, me personally, I don't think it's absolutely necessary to specify. Sorry. And I think there should be some flexibility where the committee chairs and the overall body can determine as needs be who they need to co-opt to get particular advice on particular matters. But I don't believe you have to stipulate that these external members should be part of the committee. That's just my opinion.
And also to submit declaration. You see, I understand, Kamika, that for most board members, you're breaking up, AG.
Right. I'm saying that it could be provided for in a general power to
AG,
co-opt require terms and conditions as may be necessary without an explicit provision for external members.
right.
I'm saying
You're breaking up badly, AG. You're not coming across, AG.
not stationary, Chairman. I'm joining you from out west.
Okay.
Right. So sorry. Are you hearing me any better?
Hearing you much better now.
Right. I'm saying that the intention is to enable the committees to make use of expertise that is not readily available in the established membership. So a general power to co-opt persons or to engage persons as necessary on such terms as are necessary, or whatever the language may be, could achieve that goal without providing for external members if the concerns of Member Robinson are being taken on board by the committee.
If you scroll up, Kamika, number 3 seem to provide for that.
Because the general intention is to ensure that there is power to co-opt persons, and that usually exists for committees.
Right.
But it appears that you want to provide for that, so it can generally be provided for without creating the structure of external members.
But that's the point, AG. So number 3 seems to be appropriate, which is
but that's a matter we should the policy approval.
Right. But I'm saying I would propose that if you stop at number 3, you would have successfully implemented the policy. I mean, to go to number 4.
Well, Chairman, let us note the concern. The committee should note the concern,
Right.
because the policy considerations that are new policy considerations or shift again will have to be approved by the appropriate policy approval mechanism.
Okay, no problem. All right. So bear that in mind, Tamika, as AG said, as we are indicating, is that really a general power to co-opt such expertise as are necessary to carry out the functions. Okay?
Very well, sir. Thank you.
Continue.
So we had looked at that. So members of a committee may be reappointed, and it would be in line with the membership of the authority or determined on an ad hoc basis.
Sorry, Kamika, Chairman, I wanted to say that if the intention, I'm sorry I should have raised it earlier in respect of the tenure of commissioners. The general thinking is to have the tenure transcends administration. And
Right.
so 5 years, so it's usually a 7 with the power to reappoint. And since the policy is to enable a staggering, then a second appointment would be for could be for less than the 7 years. But generally, if the intention is to have commissioners in office that would transcend political administration, then the term is usually longer than 5 years. Just bear that in mind.
How did we get to 5 years instead of 7 years? I mean, I can understand, the idea is some could be appointed for 7 years and some for 4 or 5 years with the option to renew. Is there any indication how we got stuck at 5 years? It could be.
Chair, right. So Chair, initially, it was we recognized that 7 years is the usual mechanism to transcend different administrations. However, given the newness and the type of authority that this is envisioned, it was decided, or it is being suggested, that we utilize a 5-year approach instead. And instead of appointing everyone in the first instance for 5 years, those appointments could actually be less than 5 years.
So we do have the model in our laws at the level of the Constitution, no less, where special provisions are made for first appointments, and thereafter you have transitions for subsequent appointments. I suggest, Chairman, we note this matter for further policy deliberation,
Right.
and approval.
In other words, we just need to look at the number 5 or 5, 4, 5, or 7, something like that, Kamiko. Okay?
Very well, Chair.
Just so that, you know, we have a transitional and carryover as the commission, you know, as the authority move on over the decades. Okay?
Very well. Thank you, Chair. Right. So the information, and would you like me to go a bit more into the different types of committees, or just go?
I don't think that is necessary,
Okay.
but it's quite clear.
Only to the extent, Chairman, if the committees are being specified in law, because I heard earlier in the presentation that some of the committees would be named in law. So if they are to be, then yes, the Joint Select Committee should hear more about it.
No, but
Remember,
my
this is a
understanding-
revised.
These are recommended committees that could assist the authority, but not
But
necessarily.
if they are going to be specified in the legislation, remember we're dealing with a revised structure
Right.
that is not currently reflected in this iteration of the bill.
Right.
So that the committee would need to know what it is that would be specified, being proposed.
Well, that is why, you know, in the bill itself, in the schedule actually refers to the authority being able to appoint committees to assist it. Isn't that my understanding?
Understood, Chairman, but I thought I heard it said that some of the committees would be, for want of a better expression, standing committees.
Is that the intention, Kamika? Because in the in the schedule at the moment, number 8 at page 52 of the bill, it's speak the board, which is the NERA, may appoint committees for any purpose connected with the functions of the board, that in the opinion of the board would be better regulated and managed by means of committees. Is that where you're creating these committees, Kamika?
Right. Yes, Chair. So they would have that general power, but because to ensure that certain specific and important tasks were being carried out, it was suggested that these particular committees be inserted either by subject matter or by naming the committee itself.
Right. But do you expect that once the authorities begins operations, that these committees will come into operation almost simultaneously?
Well, yes, Chair, that was the intention, or the proposed intention.
So you want to name them in the schedule, or these are committees that would be a part of details when the authority starts?
No, it was thought that it was necessary to name these minimum areas in the schedule.
Okay. But you're not limiting the board to these committees, but these are the ones that you'll begin with, and then perhaps put in the schedule such other committees as the commissioners sees the need for.
Yes, Chair.
So these 7 that you're putting in basically will be actually detailed in the schedule.
Yes, Chair. Not their terms of reference. However, it could be that we insert it in a manner to indicate that committees must exist to focus on these areas, or we could actually name the committees.
Okay.
But it's, yeah.
I don't have a difficulty, colleagues, I have no difficulty naming them, but you don't limit the authority just to
No.
these 7. You must
No,
send
sir.
other committees as it seems necessary. Okay,
No, that was not the intention.
all right. I continue then, just outline
Right. So the Enterprise Risk Management Committee would basically be focusing on compliance issues, safety and security, disaster prevention and mitigation, liability, risks such as reputational and financial risks, including procurement as well as corporate governance. And so representatives on that committee would be persons with disaster management and mitigation expertise, risks identification and management expertise, to provide insights about how to manage, reduce, and mitigate risk. The Information and Cybersecurity Committee would be focused on overseeing and advising the authority on information and cyber risk exposure of the authority, as well as the information and cyber risk strategy. And they'd also, carry out tasks such as reviewing the authority's information and cybersecurity breach response and the crisis management plan. There'd still be need for an information communications technology governance committee, and that committee, contrasting with the other information communications committee, would focus on monitoring, advising, and making recommendations to the authority as to how to strategically direct and align the authority's ICT framework. And we know that's a major backbone of the authority. It's again important to have a human resources development committee, and that committee would focus on strategic implementation of the human resources practices. So as you can see, this is the strategic high-level focus. So overseeing hiring, promoting, firing, but also importantly, succession planning, training and development of the authority. The financial management and accounting, that committee would focus on how the finances of the authority are being dealt with. So it would keep the finances of the authority under review to ensure that the authority is being financially responsible, keeping within the budget, adhering to the procurement schedule and requirements. So they'd review the procurement process, including the tendering in money, and also putting in mechanisms with regard to monitoring the compliance with the relevant laws and regulations. And of course, there would have to be the audit committee, which will, among other things, monitor and advise the authority on promoting productivity, quality and volume of service against best practices and standards. So those were the committees and their intended focus.
So I understand now, Kamika, you have reduced the authority from 15 to 9 commissioners. And these 9 commissioners will have about another 30 persons helping them to carry out their functions. Is that understanding? Because that's effectively, because each member will chair a committee.
No, not necessarily.
Definitely, you're going to have 7 committees that will be assisting the authority. And these 7 committees may consist of 3 to 4 members. So that instead of 9 members now, you're going to have probably about, I would say about 30 or so persons, managing and focusing on the running of the authority. No, I'm not objecting at all. I'm really saying is that, you're moved away from 15 to 9, but the 9 will have 7 committees assisting them. Isn't that so?
Well, that's the proposal, Chair.
I think it's important for us to note that so that, the general public can appreciate that although you have 9 commissioners managing Tenure, that they will be assisted by expertise, who will be advising these 9 committee or commissioners in carrying out the functions of the authority, which I think is a good idea. Okay, so we just have to bear that in mind. So the public don't feel that it's just these 9 members independently using their own independent views, that committees have been set up, 7 committees have been set up to advise, the authority in the carrying out of their functions, be it in in the auditing or be it in the human rights and the rule of law within the authority, as the case may be. So I'm saying this is important when we make a presentation to Parliament and the general public at large, that even though this 9 members will be ensuring that the policies of the authority are properly carried out, they will be advised by 7 committees, of which additional resources are available in instructing and guiding and advising them. Is that how you, how I put it, isn't that how it's supposed to be presented, Kamika?
Yes, Chair, that's essentially operationally what would take place, including, of course, you know, the appropriate staff, management staff, as it relates, yes.
Yeah, but what I'm really saying is that these 9 members will have 7 committees to ensure that the policies are properly executed.
Yes.
What is the estimated size of the overall bureaucracy for the entity, Chairman? Do we have an idea?
I really don't have no idea, AG, because that is when, once this is set up, then the executive director will be the person who will have to detail how everything is to be put into operation. But I don't think we have detailed staff, save and except for the executive director and the deputy. Isn't that so, Kamika?
Yes, Chair.
Chairman, if I may.
Warren.
Yes, Chairman, thank you. Just to bring to the attention of the committee that Pricewaterhouse is currently looking at the restructuring of the RGD, and they are defining all of the new job descriptions, including job descriptions for the national identification and registration component. And once they're finished and aligned with the approved law, then those will be submitted to the Ministry of Finance for consideration.
Because, AG, that's a good question you asked, because I remember when we signed off on the Integrity Commission, the question arose that when we brought the Corruption Commission, Integrity Commission, and the Contractor General together, we thought that those members would constitute not only the core, but all that is required. But as we are seeing now, they're almost going to double the number of staff that those 3 bodies had. Isn't that so, AG? From the proposal I see coming to Parliament from the Integrity Commission, it's almost doubling the number of members that those 3 authorities had. Isn't that so?
It appears so to me.
So we can really state the actual number. I think, is Pricewaterhouse going to assist Warren in setting up this authority, to the best of my understanding?
Well, as part of the process, there will have to be, transition, and there's a component in their contract to develop the necessary plans and documentations to facilitate transition. So once the law is approved and the structure is approved by Ministry of Finance, the government will have to put in place a transition team to facilitate the process and the establishment.
All right, wonderful, wonderful. So Kamika, the appointment of the executive director and the deputy remain the same as in the bill at the moment?
No, Chair. The executive director is the only staff member, the only officer that has a detailed appointment mechanism in the proposed changes.
But in the bill itself, and the bill at the moment, it also had the deputy chief executive officers.
Yes, Chair.
And also other appointment of other members, how they're appointed in the present bill at the moment.
Right. So let me take you through the section with regard to the appointment of the executive director. So as a result of the authority being constituted as a commission, the chief executive officer would now be an executive director. The appointment and termination, the executive director would be appointed by the authority after consultation with the minister and employed on such terms and conditions as determined by the authority. The functions were also revamped, and it is proposed that the functions be as stated, that the executive director would be responsible for the day-to-day management of the affairs of the authority to achieve the performance targets and they be responsible for coordinating the functions of the authority. So the authority would still have those functions, but the executive director would be responsible for coordinating the functions and ensuring that they're carried out in an efficient and effective manner, ensuring the timely implementation of the decisions and directions of the authority, as well as the inspectorate as directed by the authority, submitting quarterly reports and all the other reports. The executive director would also prepare the budget and submit that to the authority for approval. And here we have that the executive director would be responsible for developing and implementing the operational policies, regulations, and procedures as approved by the authority. And that's in relation to particular functions, including human resource management, financial management, asset and property management, enterprise risk management, and importantly, ensuring that the authority is kept informed of all the matters that are material to the administration of the authority. It was also inserted that the executive director would be responsible for performing such other functions as may be assigned or delegated to the executive director by the authority or under the Act. As it relates to performance and reporting, the executive director would report to the authority, and the authority would direct the activities and monitor the performance of the executive director. Importantly, it is being proposed that the bill also indicate that where the director refuses to comply with the directions given by the authority, he shall be liable to be removed from office by the authority, subject to observance of procedural fairness and the rules of natural justice. With regard to that particular provision that emanated from a from a review of the Electoral Commission Interim Act with regard to the Director of Elections under that Act, and it was thought necessary and important to indicate such a provision in this bill, particularly given the numerous submissions that were made regarding the monitoring of the performance of the executive director. With regard to the tenure, it is being proposed that the executive director be employed for a specific period of time, and that time be a maximum of 3 years at any point in time, but he may be reappointed. The reappointment would be subject to the performance, and again, it would be carried out in accordance with established best practices, meaning employment practices, as well as ensuring that there's procedural fairness and that natural justice is observed in carrying out that particular thing. Now, as it relates to other staff, the authority, because it's a commission, which has quite a bit more autonomy, the only staff that was indicated was the executive director, as opposed to the current bill where the authority where it was specified that the authority would also have deputy CEOs. Now, in this bill, it's proposed that the authority would be responsible to appoint, oversee, and supervise and discipline all the staff on such terms and conditions as may be approved by the authority. It would be the executive director who would submit the organizational structure, for want of a better explanation, to the authority, and the authority would be responsible for carrying out these functions. Remuneration would be in line with that prescribed by the minister with responsibility for the public service.
Yeah,
and that is.
Now explain that. Does that get it? Are you saying now that the executive director will be responsible for the management and operation of the NERA, that he will also be responsible for the appointment of staff?
No, Chair, the authority will be responsible for appointing staff. However, the executive director would be operationally, practically, the executive director would indicate the staff that is necessary to the authority, and the authority would make the ultimate decision.
So I see. So the recommendations will come from the executive director to the authority for the approval and appointment of staff.
Right, Chair.
Can I intervene here?
Yes, yes.
What level staff we're talking about? I think you have to be careful that the board doesn't get, and it's the equivalent of a board, too involved in.
But that's what I'm concerned about it, Member Robinson.
Yeah, the day-to-day running of the organization. Frankly,
Well,
I think beyond a certain level, the executive director should have the authority to, consistent with government guidelines, to hire, recruit, et cetera, et cetera.
What, you see, under the present position, Tamika, the authority was, because it was almost an executive authority, which is what we did not want. We want the executive authority to be in the executive director. So why are we still having the board, the commissioners, being directly involved in executive functions, such as hiring and staff?
Because, Chair, they are the authority. The commission is also the authority, so they are ultimately responsible.
Agreed,
it's not a board. It's not a board. There is no separation like that. The authority could, for all its intents and purposes, undertake to themselves to, with an executive director, carry out all the functions. However, they're being given the power to decide for themselves what it is they require to ensure that the authority carries out the functions, and then they strategically do that, but ultimately they're the ones who will sign the contracts.
No, let me tell you, this is troubling because you're going to have a conflict between the authority and the executive director. It is inevitable if you have this. If the executive director needs to hire an admin assistant, a secretary, he shouldn't be subject to the authority there. And you're going to have conflicts because, in a normal organization, a CEO has some leverage and he or she reports to the equivalent of a board. But in essence, you're making the authority getting into the day-to-day running of the entity. And that's very problematic.
That's a concern, Member Robinson, because remember we're shifting, moving the authority away from an executive role into a governance role. One of the thought you would want to shift the appointment. We're not talking about the senior staff, the senior staff like the executive director, maybe, the real senior staff could be definitely appointed with the approval of the board. But when you start looking at low-level staff like secretary, God forbid you want the cleaner lady to be approved by the board, by the authority. I can't see how that would make sense. In other words, there are certain levels of staff, which I agree, the top maybe 5 or 10 persons should be approved by the authority. But once you go beyond 5, at most 10 persons in the NERA, I can't see why the governing body should be involved in that day-to-day operation of the staff. And I think that's Member Robinson's concern too, and I can see that other members will have that concern. How did the NIDS technical team see the commission being responsible for the appointment of all staff members, or at what level?
All staff members. Okay, recall the commission the authority is a commission, so they can delegate their functions, but ultimately they're the ones who will sign the contracts. So they can delegate functions to the executive director. He can essentially do all of the hiring, the practical parts of the hiring, but ultimately it would be the person is employed by the commissioners, not the executive director.
All right, can I, if I can use, and I served on the ECJ for a little while as an example. The director of elections would be selected by the ECJ members, but below that, I mean, the director has the authority to determine who is the best fit to work with him. Now, for senior level positions, the ECJ board would be involved in the interviews, etc., and you would have consultation and discussion. But ultimately, the board holds the executive director accountable. And if you're going to hold a person accountable, that person must have flexibility in determining within the government guidelines as to who he or she wants to work within the organization. And it can't be the authority. You're going to have a conflict. And these persons will, in essence, end up being running the organization on a day-to-day basis if they're going to be involved in that level of minutia. That's not their responsibility. Their responsibility is to hold the executive director to targets, to performance evaluation, those things. That's what they're there to do.
I think Warren and Kamika, the NIDS team need to look at that again.
Very well, Chair.
I really agree with Member Robbins. I don't know what other members of the Joint Select Committee feel, but I agree that the senior members, should have the authority should have some indication. But when it comes beyond the first top 3 or 5 members of the executive, then at the end of the day, I think the executive director and his senior directors should be responsible for the hiring of staff. I don't
Chairman?
Yes.
Yes, I believe the concerns raised by Member Robinson are indeed valid.
Yeah.
To add to that, may I have a clarification on the relationship between the board and the commissioners?
There is no board. The commission is the authority.
This is the same AG.
Oh, but that's not what okay, I see. It's in the previous iteration that there was a board when it was about a corporate, and that level is being replaced with the 9 commissioners. Okay.
Right, yeah.
Very well. But the concern is quite a valid concern. I mean, I know our models are still work in progress, but we do have examples to learn from.
I mean, did you get a chance, for example, to study, as Member Robbins said, how the ECJ, or for that matter, the Integrity Commission, how they make their appointment? Because I don't believe, to the best of my knowledge, that the commissioners, be it the Integrity Commission or the ECJ, that they get into the day-to-day, management and employment of staff members. So could we...
They don't.
Sure.
I can say I served on the ECJ for 3 years. You don't. I mean, in this case, the director of elections, if he has a recommendation, he would present it to the ECJ. If sometimes we sit in interviews, so we participate in interviews for senior level management hires above a certain level, right? And you make a collective decision, if you want to call it. You come to some consensus. But I mean, we are not involved with the, whether you're going to hire a secretary at that level. You can't be. That's not the rule.
That was not the intention. The practical intention is what you are stating. However, all that would be stated in the law is that the authority is able to employ on such terms and conditions as it deems necessary, and such staff as it deems necessary.
No, I can understand the structure, Kamika, but where you have what is on the screen.
Right, because ultimately, Chair, they would be the ones to do that. However, recall they may delegate the functions.
No, yes,
so
right.
they can't. So they can't term. So the executive director would not be able to just terminate staff.
Chairman, let's draw a distinction now and not confuse or conflate issues. Staff that are hired would be the staff of the authority. And so the provision which enables the authority to hire is a proper provision. And that of and by itself does not equate to the commissioners descending to the level of day-to-day operations. Let's be clear about that.
Okay.
I think what we're guarding against is ensuring that in the particular formulation that it is not conveyed that it would be the commissioners who would be involved into the day-to-day operational.
Well, and that is where
You went again.
And that has to be made explicitly clear.
right, and that is, you're right, that is the point, AG, that is where we want to make that clear distinction, that the commissioners are really ensuring that the executive director carries out the mandate of the commissioners. But the commissioners must not get into the supervision and oversight and termination of the staff of the authority. I mean, we need to restrict the role of the commissioners to ensure that the executive director carries out its mandate, as we have said before.
Right.
So the way it is phrased,
Yes,
you
Chair.
know, it gives that impression that the authority is actually still involved in the executive functions, which is where we are saying no, they should be really involved in the governance role, and I mean supervising and overseeing the executive director to carry out the mandate.
Right, Chair. Perhaps it should therefore have stated that they're ultimately responsible instead of simply stating
No, admitted, yes, I'm not denying that. But at the end of the day, they do so by instructing the executive director, supervising the executive director, demanding of the executive director, but not getting beyond the executive director to supervise staff in the operation of the NERA.
Right. So, Chair, if you will look at the screen right now,
Right.
one of the executive director's functions is to develop and implement the policies, regulations, and procedures as approved. And one of those is with regard to human resource management, including hiring and firing.
No, you're saying
Ultimately, it's the authority who. So what would be stated in the law, for example, is the authority may employ to the authority at such remuneration and on such terms and conditions as it considers fit, such staff as may be required for the efficient operation of the authority. It would then state how the eligibility for appointment. So whether or not, okay, I'm not certain what's going on. Right.
I believe, Chairman, that once a policy is clear and the instructions are clearly communicated to the CPC, we can get the language that we will then review. So our aim is to ensure clarity in the policy and in turn, the instructions that are the drafting instructions. And then we review the particular language to see if the language accurately and adequately reflects the intention in the policy. So,
all right. So, all right, Kamika, are there other areas you want to present this morning?
No, Chair. I believe that we have covered the major areas that there were issues with. So basically, we looked at the structure, the appointment of members, the functions of the authority, and as well as the staffing of the authority, the proposed staffing of the authority, and the prescription of committees. Oh, just one other issue to indicate that currently the deputy keeper of the records is the Registrar General. And under the Record Office Act, what takes place is that there's a appointment of the Governor General appoints a public servant to be the deputy keeper of the records. So just to point out that the Island Records Office would still be a part of the governance structure, which was stated here.
All right. Now, did you discuss CPCs, or did you discuss with CPC how this general change, that is being proposed, how they will affect the actual wording of the bill itself, especially clauses 5 and 6 and 20, and eventually 26 and 27?
Yes, Chair. We are working on the amendment sheet as we go on. And we have received a draft. We received a draft amendment sheet from the CPC with regard to how this would be implemented.
So is that something that we could circulate today for discussion tomorrow morning?
Yes, Chair, we could do that. We were looking at it with her, but if you wish
to.
AG, go ahead, AG.
So, Chairman, just by way of reminder, policy changes are to be reduced in writing in the form of a draft cabinet submission through the OPM as the quote-unquote ministry with responsibility for the bill. And then it goes through the appropriate process. One. Secondly, there is another JC that is coming on at 10 sharp. So should be grateful, Chairman, if we adjourn perhaps in another 5 minutes to enable the transition from this meeting to the next.
No, in fact, we want to adjourn very shortly. That's why we're planning. That's why we're planning for tomorrow morning. Just to see if we could get the draft, or the adjustment to the present bill.
So Chairman, let me just reiterate and clarify that all of the policy changes that are taking place to inform new provisions must be ratified appropriately and reduced in writing in the standard format through the process by which we do the lawmaking.
I accept that, AG, but to the extent that we want to see if the changes that are being suggested here, how they would affect the bill itself, right, which we will have to take back, as you quite right to say, for approval. So
the new provisions that would be drafted would form part of the report of the committee back to Parliament.
That is correct.
Because we are reviewing the bill in its current iteration. But having regard to the deliberations, we would be reporting back to the House a proposal for amendments on certain provisions and parts of the bill.
But that's the point, AG. So what I was really asking is whether we can look and see how the clauses themselves, the proposal to modify the clauses, if we could look at it tomorrow morning. That's possible, Kamika?
Chair, I believe we may need more time than tomorrow morning.
Yes, and may I just ask that the instructions to the CPC also be communicated formally in writing, because we do have to keep the records behind the records. All right, so most of the work is already done, but it's just to ensure that we also have the substance and form aligning.
Well, the instructions from the CPC as to amendments would be emanating from the committee.
Right, well, I think basically the committee, what we have discussed this morning, the real concern is to make it a bit clearer, between the commissioners and the executive director, that there doesn't seem to be an overlap of both the commissioners and the role of the executive director. In other words, we want the executive director to carry out the executive functions, and to the extent that the authority, the commissioners, yes, are ultimately responsible, but they do so via the executive director. In other words, they should not be involved in the day-to-day management, of the authority. Okay, they should just ensure that the policies and the mandates are actually carried out. All right? But
Yes,
so colleagues, if that is the case, what we'll do, because what we'll do is to come back next Tuesday morning then, rather than tomorrow morning, which would give the NIDS team some more time to instruct the CPC, and the CPC will have the modification of the relevant clauses for us to consider. Is that what I'm?
Agreed, Chair.
Does that make sense, Kamika? Because you said your discussion with the CPC might need some more time as to how the different clauses that affect governance will be adjusted. All right?
Yes, Chair. Yes. So
So
we
what
will
I'm
work
going
with her to effect the instructions of the committee. Yes.
right. So what I'm going to suggest that we adjourn now to next Tuesday rather than to tomorrow, which will allow us to consider the adjusted clauses and to further discuss the this structure, and hopefully from here we move into the inspectorate.
So for clarity, Chair, is it right? So is it then, Chair, for clarity, you would wish us to go back to the previous iteration and have the executive director hire and fire other staff specifically in the bill?
No, there's no doubt, that ultimately is the authority. Yes. In other words, the previous position, we don't want the authority to be involved. They give the executive director a mandate, and look at, if you don't mind, as Member Robbins,
I had looked at.
the ECJ and the Integrity Commission,
Right.
how they operate. The commissioners are not involved in the hiring of all staff members. Yes, they're involved in the hiring of senior staff members. It's, but whatever the figure is, staff members. It was
Sorry,
the
Chair, you're going.
What I'm saying is the hiring and firing of staff would be the responsibility of the executive director and the senior staff. But the hiring and firing of the executive director and his senior staff, yes, could be the commissioners. So the commissioner would be relying on the executive director and his senior staff to ensure that the mandates and policies, everything is effectively carried out. Okay?
Yes, Chair, thank you.
All right, so if that is so, and because there's another meeting other members are going to, we're going to ask for a motion for adjournment until next Tuesday, not tomorrow morning, next Tuesday when we continue.
Excuse me, Minister.
First, I think, yes.
Just to confirm, well, for the AG, I'm not sure. The meeting that was scheduled for today was canceled last week.
Is that this also?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, but we still will.
Just to say, just so she doesn't.
Oh, thank you for letting me know, because I've seen about 3 different communication in respect of it. But thank you.
Yes.
Grateful.
Yes. Okay.
All right, but we are going to adjourn now, and then we won't return tomorrow. We'll give this NIDS team and the CPC some more time to give us some better idea how the clauses will be amended. So we meet again next Tuesday at 8:30 to finalize the clauses and also this first Board of Governance, or the 9 members. And then hopefully by Wednesday, Thursday, we will be looking at the inspectorate. Is that okay, Kamika and Warren?
Yes, Chairman, and it would be good if we take a look next Tuesday at the appointment of senior staff and the operational staff. We are going to basically recast the language.
Right.
And ask the committee take a look so we can clear that.
Chairman.
Yes.
There is a scheduled June 3 meeting with the minister responsible for this bill. Would we want to have the resumption after that meeting so that we could go through some of the policy matters that are?
You mean schedule it for next week, Thursday?
I'm thinking that may be a better bet, so that in the interest of time and tidying up the remaining issues that the committee has deliberated upon.
But I know the team is meeting All right.
So
Yeah.
we could set 2 continuation dates, depending on how the homework goes.
Let us set it for next Tuesday, and if anything, we make a determination.
Very well, yes.
So we set it for next week, Tuesday at 8:30. But even to look at what the CPC has in relation to the adjustment of the clauses.
Very well.
Make a determination next Tuesday whether we continue on Thursday, as the case may be. Okay?
I move for the adjournment, Chairman.
Thank you very much, AG. Seconded by Member Robinson. Thanks everyone. You know, the finalization is coming to a close, but we will get there. So thanks everyone for a good meeting. We hope we adjourn until next Tuesday at 8:30. Thank you.